I think it's time to get seated so we can get started. I don't know, should we close the door or do we want to keep it open?
Vi börjar ändå, men bara så att du vet att...
Okay. Okay, let's get started, everyone, and good morning. And I hope you had the time to to get some coffee and bagel as well. And a warm welcome to this side event. I know we are still missing Burkina Faso, who is one of the speakers, but we will get started anyway, and hopefully they will arrive. My name is Marie Ottosson. And I am the Deputy Director General of SIDA, and I'm also one of the 4 co-chairs of GPDC, the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation. And the event today, it is co-organized by the 4 co-chairs, and what we are aiming for is to highlight how the multi-stakeholder partnership can lead to a meaningful dialogue and meaningful actions at the country level, which then will contribute, of course, to the SDGs, and that's what we are hoping for. We have a distinguished list of speakers with us here today. I will present them as we go along. I see that we are already 10 minutes behind schedule, so I will urge all the speakers to try to be as short and brief as possible. But we will also have a Q&A session, so there will be another opportunity for all the speakers to come back and add additional points to the discussion. And if someone will speak for a very long time, I might have to be a little bit bossy and interrupt them, but hopefully you will be short and brief. I would still like to say a few words about the GPDC before I give the floor to our speakers. The GPDC, we aim to improve both policies and partnerships, and we do that by promoting the 4 effectiveness principles. I think you all know them by heart, but I will repeat them anyway. We are talking, of course, about the country ownership, the focus on result, inclusive partnership, as well as transparency and mutual accountability. And this could also be summarized as to the why, the what, and the how of the GPDC. And just to say a few words about why are we doing that, and that, of course, goes back to what I just said. We want to contribute to the SDGs, and we want to push for the progress of the SDG, and we do believe that because by using the development cooperation, and that is then grounded in the 4 effectiveness principle, that is an excellent way of making progress to the SDGs, which is definitely needed today. Then coming to the how, we do believe that by bringing diverse development actors together, the global partnership will foster trust and policy action in countries, also something very much needed today. And then finally, the what. We are hoping that the global partnership empowers country and country-level actors to identify but also to tackle challenges for better development and cooperation. And no surprise to anyone here, that is also very much needed today. We have a work program that was approved at the end of May, and that work program is valid for 2023 to 2026. And the focus of the event today is actually on the GPDC monitoring event, and that is also the flagship of this work program. And I'm really happy that we will have the time to dig into that today. So the side event today will explore how the monitoring links to the SDGs, but also how results can feed into national development processes, including the VNRs. And I'm also very happy because as of today, we have 40 countries that have confirmed their participation. When the preparatory note was prepared for me, I think it was only 1 or 2 weeks ago, then there were 36 countries. So you can understand that there are more and more countries joining as we are speaking. And I think that is really, really great news. Today we will hear reflections on the monitoring from our speakers, and they're all representing different stakeholders in the global partnership. So with any further ado, I would actually like to introduce our first speakers. Now I need to see, we have, His Royal Highness, Mr. Suharto Monarfa, the Minister of National Development and Planning, the head of Bapenas, Indonesia. And I would also like to thank you because you are one of the co-chairs of this side event. So thank you for the breakfast. Then I give the floor to you.
Thank you, Ms. Mary Ottoson. Your Excellency, Ms. Judith Suminwa Tuluka, Minister of Planning, Democratic Republic of Congo. Honorable speakers from Burkina Faso, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning. This year, high-level political forum is organized at a critical juncture of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Globally, only about 12% of the 140 target with available data are on track, which is far from what is aimed at. Furthermore, the COVID-19 pandemic has exposed the fragility of our development system and wiped out more than 4 years of progress in poverty eradication by pushing 93% and 90 million more people into extreme poverty in 2020. Against this backdrop, it is now the time for us to strengthen our global solidarity through an effective and inclusive multilateralism. In this regard, the multilateralism that we are fostering in GPEDC should be catalyzed by effective cooperation and concrete action to accelerate the implementation of SDGs. An effective multilateralism requires a collective effort from all stakeholders in order to strengthen the ownership of development efforts as well as to mobilize resources and innovative solutions. This effort is also in line with the United Nations Secretary General's report, Our Common Agenda, which calls for inclusive, network, and effective multilateralism to get the world back on track by turbocharging action on the SDGs. Multilateralism, which emphasizes cooperation and collaboration, is crucial for addressing global challenges that transcend national boundaries. It provides a practical mechanism for countries to engage by promoting dialogue, fostering trust, and building partnership. Now more than ever, we recognize the power and effectiveness of collaborative efforts through multilateralism is tackling national disaster, humanitarian crisis, pandemic, and other global emergencies. In the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, Indonesia, through its collaboration with Gavi, has secured access to a range of vaccines to protect its citizens. Moreover, through the G20 Indonesian presidency last year, we had successfully identified 361 concrete collaborative projects as G20 deliverables in various fields, including health, digital economy, and energy transition. Distinguished participants, I recall the Busan Partnership Agreement in 2011. Moreover, 163 countries agreed upon 4 principles for effective development cooperation, namely country ownership, focus on result, inclusiveness, as well as transparency and mutual accountability. Indonesia is fully committed in strengthening multi-stakeholder partnership at the global level through our co-chairmanship in the GPEDC. This platform brings diverse development actors together through a principle-led approach to foster trust and policy action in countries. One important contribution of the GPEDC to the SDG is the GPEDC Global Monitoring Process, which serves as the official data source and evidence on the implementation of effectiveness commitment for SDGs 5 and SDGs 17. This monitoring process drives collective accountability and enhance countries' voluntary national reviews with insights on opportunity for accelerating SDGs implementation. Moreover, as an integral part of the monitoring process, inclusive country dialogue will inform government and other actors as they shape development cooperation strategies and policy in line with country priorities for better development results that leave no one behind. Distinguished participants, today's event is one of the steps forward by providing a valuable opportunity for mutual learning and exchange among all participants to further solidify our collective effort. Indonesia is honored to host the Global Summit on Multi-Stakeholder Partnership in 2024. Lastly, I extend my sincere gratitude to all you and wish you a fruitful discussion. I do thank you.
Thank you very much, Indonesia, and you were also able to stick exactly to your 5 minutes, so a big thank you also for that. Then I would like to hand over the floor to Her Royal Highness, Mrs. Judith Suminwa Tuluka, who is the Minister of Planning at the Democratic Republic of Congo, and she will provide her remarks in French, and then we will have a translation later on by the JST. So, je vous donne la parole, madame.
Thank you, dear Mary. Excellencies, Mesdames et Messieurs, en vos titres et qualités respectifs, chers invités, en ma qualité de coprésident du Partenariat mondial pour une coopération efficace au service du développement, j'ai l'honneur de vous souhaiter la bienvenue dans cette session et vous remercier de vous être rendu disponible pour cet échange, ce qui démontre votre intérêt pour les efforts en faveur de la réalisation des objectifs de développement durable qui tracent la voie pour de meilleures conditions de vie des populations. Mesdames et Messieurs, d'après le rapport 2022 sur les objectifs de développement durable, une multitude de crises d'ordre social, sanitaire, environnemental et sécuritaire ont affecté les progrès de l'ODD 17, Partenariat pour la réalisation des objectifs, ce qui requiert l'urgence de l'intensification de la coopération internationale en vue de trouver des solutions durables. D'après les données préliminaires de l'Organisation de coopération et de développement économique sur l'aide publique au développement en 2022, le volume d'aide publique au développement provenant des pays membres du Comité d'aide au développement de l'OCDE s'est élevé à 204 milliards de dollars américains, représentant 0,36% du revenu national brut des différents donateurs en 2021. Cependant, ce grand record se situe en dessous de la cible de 0,7% requise pour accélérer la réalisation des cibles des ODD. Mesdames et Messieurs, au-delà de l'aide publique au développement, les actions autour des partenariats efficaces demeurent sans aucun doute des facteurs favorables pour produire des résultats durables en exploitant toutes les ressources disponibles. À cet égard, la 3e réunion de haut niveau sur la coopération efficace au service du développement tenue à Genève en décembre passé a entériné l'adoption d'un nouveau suivi visant à renforcer les efforts déployés par les pays pour progresser dans la réalisation des résultats durables de développement à partir de la production de preuves et de dialogue inclusif d'action. À ce jour, 38 pays partenaires dont la RDC participent à ce 4e cycle de suivi qui offre l'opportunité d'ancrer les partenariats efficaces dans les interventions au niveau des pays. En ce sens, la présente session nous offre un cadre pour discuter de comment le nouveau suivi du partenariat mondial peut améliorer le processus d'examen volontaire des objectifs de développement durable et mettre en évidence la valeur des partenariats plus solides dans le domaine du développement durable. Mesdames et Messieurs, au regard des expériences et contextes des pays en développement, pays partenaires, le changement attendu du programme de travail 2023-2026 du partenariat mondial fondé sur le nouveau suivi en cours de déploiement requiert, premièrement, le renforcement des partenariats efficaces au niveau national et l'institutionnalisation du suivi avec une allocation de ressources financières et techniques équilibrées entre les niveaux mondial, régional et national. Deuxièmement, la mobilisation politique des partenaires au développement en vue du respect des engagements convenus par leur bureau au niveau des pays. Troisièmement, la mobilisation politique pour la revue des affaires inachevées, tels que le déliement de l'aide, les soutiens pour le suivi digitalisé au niveau national et les dialogues d'action. Quatrièmement, le partenariat avec des organisations régionales qui, au regard de leurs capacités et mandats, peuvent appuyer l'élan politique au niveau national et régional avec le soutien aux caucus régionaux. Cinquièmement et dernier point, le recours aux plateformes régionales et forums continentaux pour le partage de connaissances et l'apprentissage par les pairs. Distingués participants, pour clore mon propos, je réitère ma gratitude aux éminentes personnalités et aux responsables dont les contributions attendues contribueront à enrichir les échanges et soutenir l'élan politique sur le déploiement du suivi. Je souhaite plein succès à nos travaux et je déclare ouverte la présente session. Je vous remercie pour votre aimable attention.
Colleagues, I'll do a quick translation of the remarks. Je commence avec quelques mots de remerciement pour Son Excellence la Ministre pour avoir pris le temps, malgré son agenda sans doute chargé, de nous rejoindre ici aujourd'hui. Je ferai de mon mieux pour rendre justice à son introduction réfléchie. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in my capacity as co-chair of the Global Partnership, I am honored to welcome you to the High-Level Political Forum and this session on how multi-stakeholder partnerships lead to change at country level. Thank you for being here with us today. It is a testament to our collective commitment to the SDGs and a better future for all. Ladies and gentlemen, we have all lived through what the latest SDG report is telling us. A series of health, environmental, and security crises have undermined recent progress, putting still more pressure on international cooperation efforts for lasting development solutions. According to OECD data, the volume of ODA, official development assistance, amounted to some $204 billion in 2022. This represents less than 0.4% of the gross national income of major donors and barely half of the 0.7% needed to make real progress on the SDGs. Distinguished participants, in this context, focusing on effectiveness issues remains essential to making the best use of resources available. To this end, we were pleased to see the third high-level meeting of the Global Partnership, the Effective Development Cooperation Summit, hosted by Switzerland last December, endorse a new way of monitoring effectiveness, with an inclusive, principle-led and evidence-based approach that aims to strengthen countries' own development efforts. To date, 40 countries, including the Democratic Republic of the Congo, are participating in the current monitoring round, and we encourage others to join. This session offers us an opportunity to discuss, among other things, how the exercise can help inform voluntary national reviews and highlight the value of stronger partnerships in sustainable development. Ladies and gentlemen, the Global Partnership's latest work program, adopted in May and built around the relaunched monitoring exercise, now requires 4 distinct efforts. 1, that we strengthen our partnerships by institutionalizing the monitoring exercise at global, regional, and especially country level. 2, the political mobilization of development partners to ensure they are also invested in meeting their commitments. 3, political mobilization around the unfinished business of the agenda, untying aid, support for digitized monitoring efforts, and truly inclusive action dialogues around monitoring results. And 4, partnering with regional organizations and the use of regional platforms for real knowledge sharing and peer learning. Distinguished participants, I would like to reiterate my gratitude to all of you for your contributions here today and all the work you do towards stronger partnerships for sustainable development to 2030 and beyond. I wish our work every success, and I am pleased to open this meeting. Thank you, colleagues.
So thank you very much for the opening remarks given by the DRC and also for the translation by JST. As we all know, the GPDC is about multi-stakeholder partnership, and therefore, of course, we also have a multi-stakeholder panel here today. And I would just like to say a few words about the panel as such before I give the floor to the different speakers. So we have Burkina Faso here, I hope, representing a partner country. And are they here? So they won't be speaking. Okay. But I would just like to say anyway that Burkina Faso is very engaged in the GPDC monitoring process, and they're also very active when it comes to the VNR reporting process. So we are very grateful for that. And then we have UN Women, being, of course, a UN organization that GPDC works very closely with, especially now given your co-custodian role that you have together with UNDP and OECD when it comes to SDG and indicator 5C.1. And then we also have representatives from the private sector, SAAP, which is a partner involved in helping us engaging the private sector in the GPDC monitoring, but also working with us when it comes to GPDC in general. So they will also be highlighting how we can better engage and leverage the private sector networks and partnerships. That is also something I think that have been discussed quite a lot during these days here in New York now. And then, of course, we also have representatives from the civil society, the CPDE, which is a long-standing partner to the to us here in GPDC. And they are ensuring that CSOs are engaged in the effectiveness agenda. And they will also highlight how engaged the CSOs are in the VNR process through a presentation of their latest, a short presentation of their latest VNR report. So with that, I would like to open the floor to our first panelist. And then that will be Ms. Nazneen Dami, the Chief Acting in Charge of Governance and Partnership Section at UN Women. And we have one question for you, and that is, how does UN Women support national governments to advance gender equality and women's empowerment using the effectiveness principle? So the floor is yours, Madam.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, partners, colleagues, thank you for inviting UN Women to share our experience on supporting national governments to advance gender equality and women's empowerment. As you all know, gender equality is a core part of effective development cooperation, and UN Women works with all stakeholders to advance the effectiveness principles in ways that are gender responsive. We've used the Global Partnership Monitoring exercise as an important tool to advance gender responsive budgeting and support governments to direct public resources to implementing gender responsive laws and policies. Along with UNDP and the OECD, UN Women is the custodian agency for SDG Indicator 5C1, which analyzes government action in establishing systems to track and make public allocations on gender equality and women's empowerment. It is the only fiscal indicator in the SDG monitoring framework that links resources for gender equality to implementation on the ground. In 2018, we collected and analyzed data from 69 countries, and then a further 36 in 2021, taking us to 105 countries, which is a globally representative sample. So what have we learned about how the effectiveness principles actually support and drive change for women and girls on the ground? First, we know that strong country systems allow governments to allocate resources more efficiently and effectively. In our work on gender responsive budgeting, we've used the effectiveness principles to support better and more targeted resources to programs and activities that reach women and girls. We have seen examples in many countries where GRB has led to increases in girls' education, reduction in maternal mortality, improved infrastructure, and WASH programs, and more recently with COVID, an investment in the care economy. Second, we have seen that where national systems work well and are transparent, there is greater accountability both to people, but also other stakeholders, whether public or private. And this opens up space to broaden and deepen engagement of women in planning and budgeting processes, bringing their voices into the discussions. Third, in the context of mutual accountability, development partner accountability is enhanced through better alignment of national gender priorities and national systems. And they can also target ODA to areas where gender inequality is more pronounced, like the care sector or women's labor force participation, and support countries to mobilize and spend public resources to address barriers to the delivery of goods and services. Finally, we have used the monitoring exercise to support UN country teams in political dialogue with governments. This has allowed us to work closely with IFIs, strengthening inclusive partnerships that recognize the complementary roles of different actors and entry points for joint action. For example, UN Women has worked closely with several partner countries and the IMF in-country teams to strengthen capacity on gender-responsive budgeting. The monitoring framework has been an invaluable tool in UN Women's toolbox, and we're pleased that the gender equality indicator is part of the new enhanced framework. UN Women is committed to our collaboration in the monitoring process to ensure that effectiveness principles remain central in all aspects of our work, and especially in how we coordinate across the system to deliver for women and girls collectively. UN Women will continue to be an active partner in supporting development cooperation, and thank you again for the opportunity to speak here today.
Thank you very much to UN Women. And now I have been told that we actually have a translation for Burkina Faso, so then I would actually like to give the floor to his Dr. Larba Issa Kubuya Agda, who is the Director General of Economy and Planning, Ministry of Economy, Finance and Forward Planning in Burkina Faso. And then the question to you are, why are you planning to participate in the monitoring exercise? What's new, and what have you participated in this monitoring exercise also in the past? And what will you do in the future to ensure, so how will you in the past, or how will you in the future ensure that the monitoring results will inform the VNR process in your country? So with that, I will give the word to Burkina Faso.
Thank you. Distinguées personnalités, mesdames et messieurs les panélistes, le Burkina Faso vient de finaliser son processus de l'examen national volontaire et s'est engagé à participer cette année 2023 au 4e cycle mondial de l'exercice de suivi du partenariat mondial pour une coopération efficace au service du développement. C'est donc un honneur pour nous de prendre part à cet événement parallèle qui se tient sous le thème « Provoquer l'action », comment les partenariats multipartites conduisent au changement et qui nous offre l'opportunité de présenter les résultats atteints dans la réalisation des objectifs de développement durable et dans la promotion de l'efficacité de la coopération au développement. Je remercie le partenariat mondial pour l'intérêt accordé à mon pays à travers l'animation de ce panel et vous assure de notre engagement à la promotion des valeurs prônées dans le cadre de cette plateforme d'échange. Mesdames, Messieurs, les différentes crises socio-économiques et sécuritaires auxquelles le monde est confronté nécessitent une collaboration étroite entre les pays afin de renforcer la résilience. Mon pays, qui est confronté ces dernières années à une crise sécuritaire et humanitaire sans précédent, reste persuadé que les partenariats multipartites constituent des solutions innovantes dans la mobilisation des ressources pour le financement du développement. Je rends hommage à l'action du partenariat mondial qui permet à la communauté du développement de mutualiser leurs efforts pour promouvoir l'efficacité de la coopération au développement et contribuer à l'atteinte des objectifs de développement durable à l'horizon 2030. Dans le cadre de cette discussion de ce jour, nous apporterons des éléments de réponse au questionnaire qui nous a été soumis. Première question. Pourquoi prévoyez-vous participer à l'exercice de suivi? Quelles sont les nouveautés? Le Burkina Faso participe à l'exercice de suivi pour plusieurs raisons et l'exercice de cette année présente des nouveautés et des particularités par rapport aux enquêtes antérieures. Il convient de souligner que le Burkina Faso a adhéré au partenariat mondial depuis 2013 et a pris régulièrement part aux enquêtes de suivi. Le pays a pris l'engagement de participer à l'exercice 2023 afin de faire le bilan de sa coopération au développement avec les partenaires au développement, de suivre les indicateurs d'efficacité de la coopération au développement, ainsi que les efforts consentis dans la réalisation des objectifs de développement durable. Afin de mener cet exercice, une feuille de route a été établie et l'enquête va se mener sur une période d'une année, de février 2023 au premier trimestre de 2024, avec la production et la ventilation d'un rapport pays. Des dialogues d'action seront par la suite organisés autour des résultats de l'enquête et le contenu de cet exercice sera vulgarisé au grand public à travers l'organisation de conférences, de panels et d'ateliers. La particularité de l'exercice 2023, c'est qu'il prend en compte un acteur clé du développement, le secteur privé, qui a toujours été d'un soutien considérable dans la mise en œuvre des politiques publiques. Le secteur privé sera soumis au questionnaire sur l'évaluation des principes de Kampala. Une autre nouveauté qui mérite d'être soulignée, c'est qu'à l'issue de l'exercice, le pays compte élaborer et adopter un rapport pays qui ne diffère pas de celui produit par le partenariat mondial, mais qui prendra plus en détail les points développés dans le rapport produit par le partenariat mondial. Par ailleurs, l'exercice sera mené de bout en bout par les agents de l'administration publique dans un souci d'appropriation et de maîtrise parfaite de l'outil. Deuxième question. Pourquoi avez-vous participé à l'exercice de suivi dans le passé? L'exercice de suivi du partenariat mondial a été mis en place afin de surveiller les 4 principes d'efficacité du développement et de rassembler les données probantes en vue d'éclairer les discussions politiques au niveau mondial et national. Le Burkina Faso a pris part aux enquêtes de suivi antérieures réalisées en 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016 et 2018 pour promouvoir le dialogue entre les parties prenantes ainsi qu'un changement de comportement afin de produire un plus grand impact de développement. En participant aux exercices passés, le Burkina Faso a voulu faire une auto-évaluation des résultats des engagements pris à Busan. La participation de cet exercice traduit également la volonté de transparence, de bonne gouvernance, de reddition des comptes. Les résultats de l'enquête ont contribué à alimenter l'élaboration et le suivi de la mise en œuvre des référentiels nationaux de développement et surtout la stratégie nationale de la coopération au développement. Troisième question, pourquoi le processus d'enquête nationale volontaire est-il important pour votre pays? Le processus d'examen national volontaire est important pour le Burkina Faso, en ce sens qu'il permet de prime abord de rendre compte à la population et à la communauté internationale des progrès accomplis et des difficultés rencontrées dans la mise en œuvre des objectifs de développement durable. L'enquête nationale volontaire constitue aussi une opportunité pour notre pays d'apprécier l'état d'avancement des différents indicateurs vers l'atteinte des différentes cibles, de cerner les répercussions des différentes crises sanitaires et sécuritaires sur l'atteinte des ODD, mais aussi sur les finances publiques à court et à moyen terme. Il constitue également une occasion pour le pays de s'interroger sur les efforts à fournir pour être au rendez-vous de l'agenda 2030 dans un contexte marqué par des crises multiples. Au-delà de toutes ces opportunités qu'offre l'enquête nationale volontaire, la production et la présentation des rapports de suivi lors des rencontres de haut niveau constituent des occasions de partage d'expériences, de réussite, des défis, des leçons apprises, mais aussi de mobilisation de partenariats pour la mise en œuvre des politiques publiques à travers les ODD.
Madam, could I just ask you if you are shortly coming to an end? We are running a little bit out of time.
I just about the last point.
One more point,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. Quatrième question. Alors, je vais rapidement. Comment votre pays suit-il les progrès de la mise en œuvre des ODD? Pour le suivi des ODD, notamment les progrès vers les cibles de ODD, des indicateurs nationaux ont été définis et l'ensemble des acteurs du système statistique national constitué des sectoriels, de l'Institut national en charge de la statistique, etc., font périodiquement l'objet de suivi. Une matrice des ODD est constituée et fait l'objet de mises à jour régulières au sein de mon département, qui est l'acteur majeur du dispositif national de suivi des politiques de développement et coordinateur des ODD. Je vous remercie. I'm sorry for my...
No, but thank you so much for your introduction. And then I will let Rod do some introduction, translation, sorry.
Et merci, Madame, pour votre participation à la dernière minute. So I'll just translate as quickly as possible, colleagues. Burkina Faso is very happy to have finalized its voluntary national review process and to be participating in the current cycle of the Global Partnership Monitoring. Why have we planned to take part in the monitoring exercise, and how are we doing it differently? In essence, the reason this was so important for Burkina Faso was that it's an opportunity to take stock of international cooperation flows with its development partners. We drew up a roadmap, carrying out a one-year survey from February 2023 through to 24, and are producing a breakdown of a country report. Action dialogues will then be organized around the results of the survey, with the content of this exercise popularized to the general public through conferences and panels. A special feature of the 2023 exercise for us is that we are taking into account all the key players of development, including the private sector, which has always provided considerable support in the implementation of public policies. And an additional novelty is that at the end of the exercise, the country will produce its own country report on the monitoring, going into greater detail on the key policy points they want to act on. Why have we chosen to participate in the monitoring in the past? Again, this is about understanding our own aid flows and the commitments stemming from Busan in 2011. The results of the survey will feed into the national development benchmarks and above all the National Development Cooperation Strategy. And finally, why is the voluntary national review process important for Burkina Faso also? The essence of this is that it enables us to report not only to the population of a primary stakeholder, but also the international community on the progress we are making and the challenges we are having in implementing the SDGs. Thank you so much for your attention, colleagues.
Thanks a lot for the translation. And then we move on from Burkina Faso to the private sector. And then I have one question to Michael Pittelko. And my question is, how can effective private sector engagement and the Kampala principle help to strengthen the quality, effectiveness, and impact of partnership at the country level? So the floor is yours.
Madam Chair, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. It's no doubt that there is today all the hands-on-deck approach, and that means also the involvement of the private sector. And one sentence up front, at SAP and at many other companies that I work with, we embrace this approach and rise up to the opportunity to act as enabler and exemplar for the SDGs. So it's clearly the private sector is committed to the SDGs, full stop. To the question, it is easy and difficult to answer at the same time. The easy part is, can private sector make a difference? Can it add value? And we heard so already from Her Excellency Kobadia from Burkina Faso. Yes, the private sector can contribute. And there are a couple of things that they can do, and based on my 10 years plus experience in this field now, it's about mobilizing resources and expertise. We heard so before also from Indonesia. It's about a closer alignment with national and local priorities. I'll come to that in a moment, because that's not something that is obvious when you talk about private sector. It's about shared value creation, also an important term I would like to introduce for this panel discussion, because it is crucial. Innovation and scalability, that's a no-brainer that a private sector can contribute here. Strengthen local capabilities, we heard this also in various interventions, and enhanced monitoring evaluation. So, I was born and raised at the shores of the North Sea, and we love to be very concrete. And so please excuse me to introduce a concrete case to make it more tangible, what I'm talking about. And the concrete case that I have in mind is from the ICT sector. SAP is an IT company, that's why. And I've been involved, and it's a Uganda oil palm farmers example. Brief introduction, it is also a success story of the Kampala principles, so you may be aware already. It's a partnership between the government of Uganda, the Oil Palm Uganda Limited, and the Kalanagala Oil Palm Growers Trust, which is a cooperation or cooperative of smallholder farmers. That existed already since 1998, and the idea was to diversify the local economy, provide job and, important, sustainable incomes to farmers with financial records so that they get eligible for financial aid and so on and so forth. Development partner was IFAD at that time. We joined this cooperation, or this partnership a little bit later in the 2010s, and we introduced a cloud-based technology component that has enabled the integration of 2,000 oil palm producers, smallholder farmers, into local and regional agricultural value chains. So all of a sudden give them access to the broader, bigger value chains, connecting them to buyers directly. We've done the same for cashew in Ghana, cocoa, maize across Africa. And this was designed, built, and implemented in cooperation with the cooperation KOPGT, and GIZ, so your counterpart in Germany. More details would lead too far, so please have a look at the success story. When you now look at the point I said, it can help to align with national priorities. And I said, oh, there might be a question mark. There were local private sector entities and locally operating private sector entities involved in this specific multi-stakeholder partnership. And it helped to ensure that the entire exercise was driven by the needs and priorities not only of the country, coming from the government, but also of the people on the ground. And that's something where I think the involvement of the private sector can really make a difference and can help. I took 3 notes from Indonesia, so what came to my mind there, the improvement of HR quality and quantity, for example, is one of your priorities, if I'm not mistaken. Capacity, we have a company in Germany that's called Knauf, you may know it, it's a provider of building material, and they do vocational training on the ground so that their products can be adopted. That's a perfect example where this is done. Shared value creation, that's the second thing. And effective private sector engagement encourages partnerships to adopt business models that go beyond philanthropy and beyond corporate social responsibility. This is a very important aspect from my perspective. If you want a sustainable, lasting involvement of the private sector, you have to involve their core business and not their CSR. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with CSR. On the contrary, it's a good thing, but it has to be the same with the core business to create economic opportunities for the private sector also in this cooperation. I think the example in Uganda that I gave, it's obvious that there was an economic opportunity coming from this. I'll skip strengthen local capabilities because that is obvious and I already receive a hint that I have to speed up. But we'll now come to the second part of the question or my second initial response, which was, that's a difficult question. Why is it difficult? There are a lot of challenges for private sector engagement in development cooperation. First and foremost, it's the mutual understanding what drives the partner. The understanding of the public sector, what drives private sector, why do they engage, when do they engage, and vice versa. What drives the government and the development cooperation of the private sector? Huh? It's not that you're signing a check for financial aid, it's something different. The second thing is the imbalance of power, and the third thing is regulatory framework that is not yet set for purpose everywhere. Yes, lack of knowledge, I mentioned that already, so we have to find ways to understand each other, to find those areas where there's a mutual interest in a cooperation. That's where it makes most sense. We have some examples for that in Germany, where I'm from. Happy to share this in the question and answers. Then there's this lack of enforcement, critics regarding the Kampala principles. For me, it's a lack of incentive. The answer to the question, why should I? Why should I engage as private sector long-lasting? So it can, of course, the financial aspect is the easiest one, but there are also other incentives that can be given. Market entry, creation of a market, healing market failures, and so on and so forth. And the last one is the imbalance of power. Mutual partnerships require also a balance of power, and very often, that's my observation, the donors have significant influence over the design, implementation, and evaluation of development projects. That's a matter of fact. And we need a mechanism to balance interests based, for example, on investments or whatever it is. The insufficient regulatory framework is the last aspect before I close my intervention, and that means the instruments that I have seen are not always fit for purpose for the private sector engagement, especially in the IT sector, where I'm from, but also in the other sectors. Let me pause here. I could talk another 15 minutes easily, but let me stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Michael Pittelkow. And then we move on to the civil society. And then I would like to give the floor to Mr. Richard Sebakirianga. Please, I forgot to, I was going to ask you a question as well. My questions are, how engaged are CSO in the VNRs? And what do the latest findings from your research show us? And how does CSO leverage the monitoring exercise to create a better enabling environment for civil society? And I do understand that the questions are maybe too many for giving a short response, but please feel free to comment on whatever you want. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair. I will certainly stick to my 5 minutes. But also to say that there is no connection between me and his case study, although I come from Uganda. But I want to confirm that I know about it. Thank you. Just to quickly say that I will just really go into the findings of the study, but also hard copies will be available. And if you want a soft copy, it's also available. So that means that then you've saved me another 2 minutes. But just to say that what we did as, CSO Partnership for Development Effectiveness is a global platform that has been here with the GPDC since its inception. So we are as old as the GPDC, maybe the most historical partners that the GPDC has. Now, this study was done in 64 countries. There were about 109 respondents that we looked at, and 19 of the countries that we worked with were countries that have gone through the VNR. Now, the reasons we do this kind of work is really to see what kinds of partnerships are actually happening at the ground level, and how different stakeholders, civil society and others, participating in shaping the messages that you hear at the high-level political forum, but also the messages that get engaged at country level. Now, what we found, of course, a number of very interesting insights. One is that 84% of the countries said they have SDG strategies, and that is good. The quality of those strategies was the issue. Now, that's something one can work on. At least if we know that there are countries with the SDG strategies, that means that then, the processes of engagement become much more easier. But when we asked about satisfaction, I think for most of the civil society partners, there was a varied level. About only 26% were really, really satisfied that this was happening. But many of them were still very unsatisfied or neutral about the way in which these processes are going. So I think there is work that has to be done around this whole question of country ownership, which is a key principle for us within the global partnership. In terms of things like inclusive partnerships as a principle, the findings we have show that 7 out of 10 respondents reported that existing civil society engagement mechanisms are there that focus in the planning, the implementation. But the issue, I think, was that most of them are not institutionalized, that they are ad hoc. And I think that is something to really think about. Only 47.1 were institutionalized. The quality of inclusive partnerships, that was also an issue because about only a half of the civil society that participate in the VNR processes felt that there was a dedicated process of consulting stakeholders. Now, this is something, it's good because when we look back when we started 7 years ago, I think most of the reports here were really a fashion show of states, but now I think you are seeing a little bit more than just that. And I think that that is something to celebrate. So the quality is still an issue around how things are happening. The issue around transparency, there were also lots of civil society partners that felt that the existence of national planning frameworks for reporting was still an issue, but that was still half-half. About 50% said, yeah, there are national frameworks where we can say this is how things can be tracked down, and that is helpful. So this study really went through a number of these areas, and maybe to just end, I think, some of the issues around the barriers. the ways, the key things that many of the civil society partners were seeing is around the question of government allocations versus priorities. I think there are lots of challenges there. Sometimes the priorities don't match the allocations that are made by governments, especially around when we talk about SDG, fast tracking and all that. So that's an issue to think about. The low awareness is still an issue, and also the sufficiency of consultation, not only for civil society, but also for some of the other partners. So in a sense, what this study really pointed out are things that we know that if we improve, can help the fast-tracking agenda that we keep talking about, and probably the response plans that many of the countries want to put in place. So as I said, the studies are out there. You can, read the details yourself. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And then we will have one more speaker before we open up for the Q&A session. And so then I would like to give the floor to our first discussant, Mr. Walid Badawi, who is the Deputy Director General of UNDP's, the Deputy Director of UNDP's Bureau of External Relations and Advocacy. So please, the floor is yours, Walid.
Madam Chair, Salmat Pagipa, bonjour Madame, good to see everybody here. It was really a great set of diverse interventions. UNDP has been a historic partner and supporter representing the UN system on the GPEDC since inception as well. We were pleased, Mr. Richard, to be part of the launch of your excellent report just last week, but great to see Nazneen representing us also on the panel. Having served in many countries and most recently in Kenya as UNDP representative, we as the UN system and as UNDP have been, of course, looking at how do we support this monitoring framework as it now really hits the ground. And my question perhaps to our distinguished panel, noting, of course, national ownership is the key principle, one of the key principles, of course, and this has been a recurring theme that we've been hearing in many of the HLPF side events where we've heard loud and clear government is in the driving seat and the other partners, and you spoke, Michael, about the imbalance of power between the different stakeholders. So as a UN, what do you see, or what have you seen from the experience so far, is the, let's say, silver bullet, if there is one, for the UN system to actually support you? Now we have different diverse country contexts, and the roles will be different, from gender responsive budgeting to, creating incentives to convening stakeholders. But have you, from your own experience as national leaders, seen a specific role where the UN has played a particularly invaluable role that we can replicate and take cognizance of as the monitoring framework in the 40 countries cascades down? Thank you.
That's a great question, Walid, and I will ask my speakers to get back to that question. But before doing so, I would like to open up the floor for our audience to see if there are any specific questions or comments that you would like to make. We are running a little bit out behind schedule, but we do have the time. Yes, please, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Sandra Solano with the FIERA Foundation. And I am so impressed by hearing the work that is happening everywhere. But two things really struck me, and is speaking about shared value and balanced partnerships. And I'm the Chief Medical Officer of the FIERA Foundation. And what we know is that right now we're operating from a biology that is of threat and survival. And balanced partnerships and shared values are really hard to discover where we are in a defensive mode, when we are in survival mode. So I would like for you to consider including building skills. These are trainable skills to change our biology from one of survival to one of safety and collaboration. And these are very easy skills that really, I think, that have to be developed and included in all the conversations and tables of negotiation. Thank you.
Chair, I think let me go first because, well, there is enough space to go first. Thank you. I think for me, the issue around sustainable skills that has been mentioned is quite critical because, I continue?
Yes.
Okay. Because I think the issue around sustainable skills means that if you think about SDGs, global partnerships, and all these kinds of things, people need to be able to actually point to specific areas where they can be engaged. I think sometimes the question of skills is one that we think that can be got from everywhere. But for example, even when you think about issues like what I've touched on in this study around people talking about awareness or knowledge, it's because of the ways in which we sometimes don't intentionally focus on skills. So I guess that is something that we should be, also thinking about as we talk about global partnerships, how we shall accelerate the delivery of the things that we need to see. We really depend on the kind of skilling that happens in the population, among the institutions, but also here globally. So I think that for me, that's an important thing that we should be talking about.
I fully agree with you. It is extremely important. And then, do you want to come next?
Happy to do so, yes. It's not directly to the aspect of skills, but something, another word that Sandra has used has struck me, and that is the survival mode. And I just want, from a private sector perspective, to shed a little bit of light how we are dealing with that. And initially, you may think private sector, that's about maximizing profit, while public sector and non-profit, that's about maximizing welfare. That's, to put it very simple in black and white terms. But both is only possible on a joint basis, and that's the basis of our existence, our environment, our globe. So that's definitely the shared value as such. And we see that in private sector, over and above the top line and the bottom line. The bottom line is the cost and the top line is the revenue. There's a third one introduced, that's the green line. And the green line is the one that could be translated into SDG related. Typically it's about climate, it's about CO2 footprint and so on and so forth. But actually you can translate all this into SDGs. And I don't think that the survival mode as such is hindering us to come to shared value creation. On the contrary, I think it's a driver, because that's the basis for all of us. Whether we're trying to maximize profits or to maximize welfare, it doesn't matter. It's about the basis.
Thank you. And then we also had a question from Walid, and maybe that is a question that could be answered by our partner countries, what the UN could do in order to support you, or if you have good examples of when the UN has supported you in a very good way, so then that could be replicated. I don't know if we need to translate the questions to French, or if it's okay to ask the questions in English.
Sure. La question était vraiment comment le système onusien au niveau du pays, donc l'équipe de pays, pour faciliter la convocation des partenaires des différents genres, donc le secteur privé ou la société civile.
Yes, do you want to come in?
Je pense que chez nous, en RDC, ce travail a déjà commencé. Parce qu'avec d'ailleurs l'appui du PNUD, on a eu à mettre en place une politique pour un partenariat avec le privé. Et donc, il y a eu toute une série de discussions avec la Fédération des entreprises congolaises, avec le ministère du Plan et d'autres ministères sectoriels pour mettre en place, il y a une politique qui a été mise en place pour rapprocher vraiment pour assurer que À partir du moment où le niveau politique travaille sur un certain nombre de politiques, etc., mais qu'on ait aussi une place prépondérante pour le secteur privé qui va aider justement à accélérer le développement. Parce que la partie gouvernementale, à elle seule, ne peut pas. Alors, ce qui se passe aussi, c'est qu'il y a beaucoup de discussions aujourd'hui. Ça nous a permis d'ailleurs de nous mettre autour d'une table, de discuter notamment sur la question du climat des affaires, etc. Et donc, la place prépondérante que peuvent avoir les entreprises privées, tant pour améliorer l'accès à l'eau, l'accès à l'électricité et d'autres espaces possibles qui vont permettre d'accélérer ce développement. Donc, chez nous, en tout cas en RDC, cette discussion a déjà commencé. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Rod, do you want to give a short translation?
Sure. So the ministers commented that actually in Kinshasa, in the Democratic Republic of Congo right now, with UNDP's help, support as part of a program, there is a framework for engaging with the public sector. And they're working with the primary interlocutors of Congolese enterprise. And they're creating a program that helps ensure not just that the private sector has a prominent place in the development of policy, but that it's actually helping with policy that targets the SDGs and helps accelerate the SDGs.
Thank you. I would also like to ask if Burkina Faso would like to add anything to this question.
Oui, il faut signaler qu'au niveau du Burkina, le travail, il y a un long travail qui a déjà commencé. Et rien que la semaine dernière, on a réuni la société civile, les ONG et l'ensemble du secteur privé pour voir comment on peut aborder, n'est-ce pas, l'enquête de cette année. Et le questionnaire est adressé et au secteur privé et aux ONG et à l'ensemble des acteurs qui interviennent dans le processus du développement au Burkina Faso. Vous savez que le secteur privé est un clé, est un acteur principal du développement qui accompagne le gouvernement dans la réalisation des objectifs de développement. Donc, on a voulu ratisser large en ajoutant, en impliquant l'ensemble des acteurs qui concourent, n'est-ce pas, en tout cas à la politique du gouvernement au Burkina Faso.
And Burkina Faso has already begun similar work and met just last week with civil society partners, but also with the private sector. So again, aiming for a multi-stakeholder approach, and is surveying both groups to make sure that they can be valued partners in Burkina Faso's development goals.
Then I will try to wrap up.
Sure, just a quick response, and thank you so much for raising the point about capacity building for us to move from survival to resilience. I think, addressing gender inequality is one key way of building resilience in societies. And I think you will all agree that one way to do that is to make sure that our policies and our commitments actually work for women and girls. So how we can do that is, gender responsive budgeting has been one way, as I was explaining, of us to delivering that kind of capacity for governments and for national partners, as well as civil society. There's a big role for civil society in terms of accountability, and knowing the language, knowing the terminology, knowing the strategies and policies are very key. So I think we do definitely need to move to resilience, and how do we build that equality? How do we reach those being left behind? I think these are some of the strategies UN Women has found very useful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I will not try to summarize the discussion today, but I would just like to say that I am very impressed with what I have heard here today, and I think it is clear that we are on track. It's not like with SDGs where we are off track. I think that with the help of everyone here, we can get back on track. And I think that listening to all of you and the monitoring that is now taking place at the country level, that is a key to success. And I think that this side event was excellent because, and I could easily have continued for many more hours, but I will not do that today. But we have learned very clearly also why the monitoring exercise is important, why the monitoring is important, why we all need to work together. I will not say anything more, but I can assure you that you can follow all the progress through this global monitoring dashboard. And some more information will also be sent to you after the event today. So you will not miss out of anything that has been said, and we will make sure to continue discussing everything that you have raised during the meeting today. So with that, I would like to hand over the floor to His Royal Highness, Mr. Bogad Vidmarko. Sorry if I pronounced it wrongly. Maybe he has left. Yeah, no, he's here. Who is the Deputy Minister of National Development and Planning at the Bappenas, Indonesia, to conclude this event today. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank all the speakers and participants for the lively and fruitful discussion today. Your invaluable insight and ideas have further fueled the momentum needed to achieve a more effective cooperation in development. Today, we have explored the transformative potential of multi-stakeholder partnership in driving impactful development cooperation. We have heard inspiring stories of daily cooperation among governments, social society, the private sector, development partner, and other stakeholders. This demonstrates that partnership is not only a buzzword, but a powerful instrument that enables us to harness diverse expertise, resources, and perspective for sustainable development. Throughout our deliberation, it is clear that reiterating our commitment to the principle of development equity is crucial. A multi-stakeholder partnership is a key enabler in doing this. In this context, the GPD is a powerful multi-stakeholder vehicle for generating and sharing knowledge to maximize the effectiveness of all forms of cooperation for development. The GPD's new monitoring exercise provides new evidence and data in tracking progress and empowering relevant stakeholders to better identify and address country-specific development challenges. The monitoring exercise also serves as the main source of data for the SDG target, EA, SDG 5C, SDG 17-15, SDG 17-16. Therefore, plays an important role in enhancing accountability and supporting the achievement of SDGs implementation through partnerships among sectors. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, before concluding, allow me to once again thank to the government of Burkina Faso, Honduras, UN Women, SAP from private sector side, and the CPDA for saying their experience is set. We would also like to extend our sincere appreciation to the UNDP and OECD for their continued support as the joint support team for the GPDC. Their continuous assistance has been instrumental in driving the success and effectiveness of the partnership. My appreciation also goes to all participants for their attendance and contribution. I would also like to reiterate Indonesia's commitment and express our enthusiasm to host the Global Summit on Multi-Stakeholder Partnership next year. This summit will be an ideal opportunity for further dialogue, collaboration, and sharing of best practice. By bringing together stakeholders from around the world, the summit will address pressing development challenges and ignite catalysts for innovation and meaningful action. Let us carry us the momentum generated here today and translate into tangible outcome in our respective country. Together, we can build a more sustainable and prosperous future for all. Thank you.
So with that, we have actually finished 2 minutes before. So that is great. I wish you all a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, madam.